So, it's Kevin, part 2. I did say we'd have a look at some bits of the electrics, but I figured what I'd do is just go through the electrics, things I found out and things that were good, bad or indifferent, and hope it helps. So this is a 200 watt solar panel. After a lot of arguing to and fro, I settled on a rigid as it being a bit more robust. Also the air getting underneath can cool it. These brackets are just glued on with Sikaflex and then screwed on to the frame. Make sure you get an inlet that has two holes, one for the positive, one for the negative, and also have a think about the one that you're going to get, how long the cables are, because that saves having to make a join if you get one with the cable length is the one that you need. So the cable comes through. I've just put some paneling up to try and cover up the inside of the cabin, but the Votronic controller, I looked at several. It seems to be about the best sort of performance versus price. Now I made a mistake which I can tell you about to save you some money. Solar panels are either ones that produce voltages in the sort of high 40s or high 20s, and if you get the wrong box you blow it up and it stops working. So have a look at your solar panel, make sure that the Votronic regulator matches not only the wattage, which I did get right, but the voltage it produces as well. So I also put in these two cutouts. The regulator needs to be always powered by the 12-volt battery before and after you actually take any of the solar cables away. You can't have it disconnected and then disconnect the solar panels, because again you can fry it. So that's so that I can disconnect it and mess around with the battery without having to disconnect the actual wires. So you can see the battery is fully charged. It's got the auxiliary electrical circuit running, top light, and that will actually also charge a little bit of the car battery. Not only the batteries, the lithium battery for the camper. So I'll show you where I've put stuff, because it took some time to figure out where they could go, and it seems to work. So this used to flip up with a hinge at the back there, and when I put the recoil seatbelt in, it would no longer come up. So I took the hinge out, and now this whole thing will lift and come out, and there are screws this end and that end to keep it fixed on top. Because all the batteries are inside there, it seemed a logical place to put the inverter. Also enables it to keep cool. So it's a 1500 watt. It could go to 3000, but for the infrequent times that I would use it, and the significant hike in costs from this to the 3000, I stuck with this, and I figured that this would power most of the things we want to use. So this was the fuse box that was actually already in. It wasn't here, it was in the back. So I've got one to the plug sockets that will be in the back, one to the water heater, one to this, which is I can plug the battery charger in, and one I had going to the fridge, but I may not actually power the fridge up to 240 volts, and obviously then the whole thing can be switched off all in one go. And the cables for that go through the floor here and then down into the back of where the wheel, spare wheel was kept, or across into here, which is where the water heater is, and we'll do that another day. So I'll show you how I wired things up inside and see if it's any help to you. So that's the 4 screws out. 2 and 2, and I should point out to start with, you can see there's quite a lot of lead from the underside, and that's to enable me to be able to lift the whole thing off without any restrictions. There's a pretty hefty fuse for the inverter which sits underneath the lid. Now you might look at that and think, Jesus, but actually it's quite straightforward, and I'll point stuff out to you in a hope to make sense. There are quite a few diagrams online of a circuit for camper electrics, and that's all I did. I took that and followed it from here. So here's the diagram I was talking about. Just check it online. So this is a lithium phosphate battery. It's 100 amp hour, and then this is a 640 amp hour for the starter. Possibly could have gone for a slightly bigger one on the starter, but hey ho. A few things: don't put that vent out pipe in until you've finished all the wiring and everything, because there's not a lot of room. Don't put the charged battery to battery charger in until you've got both the batteries in and sorted. And you can see that there's a plastic frame for each battery that's bolted to the floor, and the floor of this compartment has got quite a lot of additional support underneath it, so it will take the weight of the battery. I've got the soundproofing in the box clearly before I put anything in it, otherwise this is going to resonate like a tin drum, and that's the same as the silent coat that's everywhere. Actually, it's a Uracer HSB030. These are the cables coming down from the solar controller. We've got a positive, a negative, and a positive going to the starter battery. So this is, if you remember from the first video, on the outside there's a vent, because obviously lead acid batteries produce some hydrogen when they're being charged, and it's got to be able to vent out. So there it is, under the dark window, the black vent, and on the inside the pipes attached to it. This is so that if it's raining hard, the water can't splash in and get onto any of the terminals. That is just a standard bit of drain pipe, and if you cut off the flange at the end, coincidentally it's exactly the right size to then fit into the back of the vent that's on the outside. So just to eliminate a few things that are a bit confusing, this is just the lead from the battery charger. So if you just kind of ignore that, that's the lead from the additional charge from the solar, so we can sort of ignore that. So we've got power coming from the solar panel, which is here to here, and then onto the camper battery. You've got a cable going from the camper battery to the inverter, and then you've got a power cable from the camper battery going to the goes behind here, along, up, and then comes through just there, and then the negative does the same thing from over here. So we've accounted for 4 out of the 5 cables going to the positive terminal on the camper battery, and the 5th one is from the positive on the car battery through a battery to battery charge converter to the camper battery. What that means is that when there's sufficient voltage coming through to the charge battery when you're running, it will then go to charge the camper battery. This is the charge to charge controller that I bought, or battery to battery charger should I say. Don't get a split charger that's standard unless you've got lead acid batteries on both sides of the equation, because and I made this mistake, the battery to battery charger kicks in at 13.8 volts. Well, it's highly unlikely that a relatively charged lithium atom battery is going to drop that low, so it will always be trying to charge back to the car battery, and so you'll never fully charge the lithium battery. So this will cut in at a better voltage, and there is plenty of control in it, so that when this is charged and getting sufficient voltage, it will come through to here. Nothing leaks back to the lead acid battery. Now this will let you, on a more modern, if you've got certain other things connected, allow you to have a trickle, I think it's 1 amp back to the lead acid battery for the car, but because I've got a slightly more older, simpler setup, it won't do that. And last of all, there is a temperature lead thermometer that goes to this to ensure that this isn't being overcharged. So cable with a fuse from the solar panel, and then a fuse either side of the battery to battery charger, and then I've got another fuse here for the stuff coming into the camper, and then obviously individual blade fuses eventually when that's wired up properly. This was a recommendation I was happy to take from somebody else. Takes the whole power of everything off. You can even take the thing away if you want, but to be honest, it's going to be behind a cupboard. Is it really that important? And also, another tip was label the bloody wires whilst you're putting them in. That way you don't get into a pickle later. I've, for example, wired the back of all the switches with the same earth, and then one earth goes to one of them for the lights on the actual switches. This is a negative or earth bar. There's a load of connections in there for as many as you want, really. I figured I'd rather bring all the earths back to here rather than trying to earth them out on the frame, which because of changes up at the engine may not have quite as good a return. There is one earth there, and that's for the light at the back, which points down for reversing, and also a bit of view at the back. Incidentally, I repurposed the air pump machine, or the fan should I say. It was there where the light is, and it would take air in and blow it into the back. What I've done is actually take it, I thought if you reverse the polarity it would go in reverse, but it doesn't. It just keeps going in the same direction, so I had to physically move it. So it takes air from in the back and blows it out the front. And that's the switch for the light above the door, which again is going to be there, with no additional switch on the dashboard, on the panel that I've got to go. There's going to be a cupboard along the front here, and the control panel is going to be on the front, in front of this lot. This is another Rigid Industries light. Although it's quite small, it's really quite bright. That's the other news. I chickened out of the 3-way fridge. It was going to prove such a bloody nightmare to get the right venting and gassing and all the rest of it. And it was just so big. It was going to impose a huge space in the back. So I bit the bullet and got this.